didn't just survive the circus, you made the clowns quit performing. That's the part that stings them the most. They built the stage, rehearsed the lies, choreographed your downfall, and still ended up being the joke of their own show. You didn't even need to lift a finger. You just stood there, silent, unbothered, while they drowned in the chaos they created. That's not luck. That's psychological warfare executed with class. It's funny, isn't it, how filth always assumes it can stain gold. They thought dragging your name through their mud would make you dirty, but mud doesn't stick to fire. You burned right through their little performance and the smoke that followed. That's their reputation collapsing. You didn't fight back because you didn't have to. You were never in the same league to begin with. You were the calm in the storm, and they were just wind, loud and directionless. Here's a fact they'll never admit. When someone refuses to react, it breaks the manipulator's entire system. They need your emotions to survive. They feed off your defense, your explanations, your panic. But you starved them. You took away their fuel, and that silence was the sound of their power dying. Psychologists call it extinction behavior, when the predator realizes the prey no longer dances for its amusement. That's exactly what happened here. You didn't just handle that disgusting situation, you ended it by refusing to play. And thank you, chosen one. Don't forget to pay this message forward. Press like, subscribe, and help spread it to others, because what you're doing isn't small. It's a ripple of resistance in a world that worships noise. You're not just one person, you're part of a force. Now let's get back to your story. See, the universe has a dark sense of humor. It loves to let fools expose themselves while you stand there watching. And oh, how they exposed themselves. Every rumor they spread became a confession. Every insult they threw was a mirror. They tried to humiliate you publicly, but ended up writing your legend instead. That's how poetic justice works. The universe doesn't argue, it arranges, and it arranged for your silence to be the loudest moment of their lives. Let's talk about that silence, the same one they mistook for weakness, until it started haunting them, because silence is a mirror, and when you gave them nothing to hit, they started seeing themselves. You ever notice how guilty people talk too much? How liars over-explain? That's because truth stays still. It doesn't chase rumors, it watches them die of exhaustion. That's what you did. You didn't react. You let the truth rot their image from the inside. They thought you'd beg, break, or lash out. But you were composed, surgical, terrifyingly calm. You made peace look dangerous. You made composure look like a weapon. You didn't lower yourself to their level. You raised the entire standard of what control looks like. You were so unbothered that it became unsettling. You turned their obsession into their undoing. And now, they can't even mention your name without remembering how badly they failed to shake you. Here's the beauty of what happened. When you refused to respond, you created psychological distance. That distance turned into power. Power turned into mystery. Mystery turned into fascination. And now, even your haters are students of your silence. They're analyzing your calm, replaying your reactions, trying to decode how you didn't collapse like they did. The truth is, they can't imitate it, because composure requires character, and they traded theirs for gossip long ago. You handled that disgusting situation like an apex predator handles a threat. No panic, no noise, just quiet calculation. You didn't react emotionally because you understood something they didn't. People who want to drag you down are already below you. The second you argue with them, you step off your throne, and you, chosen one, stayed seated. You let their desperation perform below while you sat in quiet amusement above. That's what unsettles them. They realized too late that they were entertainment, not enemies. You ever see a snake try to bite steel? That's what it looked like. They struck at something they could never damage. Every attack they threw bounced back and hit them harder. They tried to poison your name, but ended up tasting their own venom. And the crowd that once laughed with them? Now they're whispering about how you stayed unshaken while your enemies self-destructed. They can't even hate you properly anymore. They're too busy being impressed. There's a psychological term called cognitive dissonance. It's what happens when people expect you to act one way and you do the opposite. Their brain short-circuits. That's what you triggered. They expected tears, outrage, collapse. You gave them silence, grace, poise, and now they can't process it. Their story doesn't make sense anymore because you refuse to follow their script. You flipped the narrative and made them irrelevant. That's not just strength, that's dominance. And now look, the same people who mocked you are studying you. The same ones who called you fake are copying your calm. The same mouths that spread rumors are quoting your patience. You became their quiet humiliation. They can't admit it out loud, but every time they see you still standing, still glowing, still unfazed, it cuts deeper than any comeback could. You're not just winning, you're haunting them. You know what's funny? You didn't need revenge. You became it. You became the walking consequence of their mistake. They underestimated your restraint, and that was the last mistake they'll ever make with you. Because now they know what kind of storm they were playing with. You don't need to raise your voice when your silence already has gravity. You don't need to fight when your existence itself is the reminder that they lost. So yes, chosen one, they're impressed. Not because they suddenly grew respect, but because they finally saw what power actually looks like. It's not noise, it's not rage, it's that cold, surgical calm that makes every liar panic. You didn't just walk away spotless, you left footprints in their guilt. That's what they'll never erase. That's why they still whisper your name. And that's why this world will remember how you handled that disgusting situation. Not with weakness, but with precision that left everyone breathless. And listen, chosen one, don't go anywhere. What you just heard was the warm-up, the appetizer. The real dismantling of this entire situation is just beginning. If you think that first blow rattled them, wait until we peel back the layers of how your silence wrecked their entire performance. Drop a comment below with the number 11 if you're done explaining yourself to people who tried to bury you in trash and came out shocked you didn't stink. And if you feel this message sharpening your spine, fueling your peace, and exposing your enemies without a single curse word, hit that super thanks and keep this fire spreading. You're not just watching this, you're fueling the movement that reminds the world composure is lethal. And now, let's go deeper, step by step. You'll see why your calm wasn't just impressive, it was surgical. If you really are who I think you are, you won't be able to look away. Let's get started. Number 1, you didn't react, you rewired the whole battlefield. You thought you triggered me. What you actually did was expose your weakness and remind me of my power. That's the punchline they weren't ready for, because when they came for you, claws out, tongues sharpened, faces twisted in fake concern and hidden envy, they were betting on your downfall. They were praying for a crack in your composure. But you didn't flinch. You didn't give them what they wanted. And in that silence, they saw something they weren't prepared to face, a chosen one who's built different. They expected a firestorm. What they got was a mirror. They wanted a meltdown. What they got was a masterclass. That's what separates you from them. You don't just survive heat, you redirect it. See, most people don't understand what you just did. They think staying quiet means being weak. They think walking away is surrender, but they don't get it. When you're chosen, you move differently. You don't react to noise. You restructure the whole damn frequency. You saw through their games like glass. You caught the intention, not just the insult, and instead of matching their madness, you flipped it into fuel. That's not just control, that's energy dominance. This isn't about being the bigger person. This is about being the smarter predator in the jungle. The lion doesn't waste time roaring at rats, and you didn't even glance down. While they threw fits, you were building silence that screamed. While they plotted your emotional collapse, you were recalibrating your next move like a machine. That kind of power, it shakes people. It's not loud, but it's unforgettable. Let's call it what it is, psychological warfare, and you won. You won without shouting, without exposing, without even participating. That's the level of restraint that humbles people. Because let's be real, chosen one, anyone can clap back. Anyone can throw hands, expose secrets or rage online. But you chose peace over performance, and that messed with them more than any insult ever could. You didn't transmute energy by accident. You knew exactly what you were doing. You watched their hate, their manipulation, their little traps, and instead of falling into them, you used them as stepping stones. You turned chaos into chess. And just like that, they realized they weren't even playing the same game as you. You want an example of what you did? Look at Rihanna. Remember when people tried to drag her through public mess, tried to reduce her to her pain, tried to trap her in drama? She didn't clap back. She built $1 billion empire. Silence, strategy, power. That's what you did. You didn't react. You restructured the entire narrative. Or take Keanu Reeves. They mocked him for being quiet, laughed at his grief, ignored him in fame circles, but he kept moving, kept creating, kept showing up with calm nobody could rattle. Now he's not just respected, he's untouchable. That's the energy you carry. Not loud, not dramatic, lethal in silence. When the world expects rage, composure becomes terrifying. And here's what's really eating them up. They needed you to lose it. They needed that reaction to feel powerful. They needed that drama to stay relevant, but you robbed them of it. And when a manipulator loses control of your emotions, it's like cutting off their oxygen. Now they're gasping, spiraling, desperate for a second chance to trigger you. But you've outgrown the bait. You're not even fishing in that pond anymore. You know what people don't talk about enough? The emotional stamina it takes to choose silence in the middle of an attack. The strength it takes to sit in discomfort, to hear lies, see betrayal, feel heat, and still not break. That's not passive, that's mastery. Most people throw fits. You flipped frequencies. Most people collapse. You recalibrated. Most people get loud. You got strategic. And now, everyone's impressed. Even the haters. They won't say it out loud, but they're watching you like a science experiment, studying your calm, replaying how you handled it, wondering how you kept your head while they lost theirs. The truth is, they expected you to act like them, but you didn't. You acted like you, chosen, disciplined, unbothered. You didn't just stay calm. You restructured the entire emotional blueprint of the moment. You absorbed chaos, filtered it, and spat out clarity. That's not emotional intelligence. That's energetic evolution. You didn't need to prove anything because your peace was proof, your stillness was evidence, your restraint was the testimony, and now your enemies are stuck in a loop. How did they stay that unshaken? They're shocked because you didn't do what 99% of people would. You didn't vent, you didn't post, you didn't collapse. You took all that nasty energy and alchemized it. That's the secret weapon most don't know how to use. Energy can't be destroyed, but it can be transformed. And you did it in real time, right in front of the snakes who tried to provoke you. They handed you poison and expected you to drink it. You turned it into fuel. That's what it means to be chosen. You don't absorb dirt, you convert it into diamonds. And maybe someone needs to hear this right now. You're not weak for not reacting. You're not soft for staying calm. You're not passive for walking away. You're dangerous because you didn't let the situation define you. You redesigned it. They'll lie and say you were scared. They'll twist it and say you had nothing to say. But deep down, they know you said more with your silence than they ever could with their screaming. They know you're calm. Expose them. They know you won without playing dirty. And that's the worst defeat of all. For them, you didn't just withhold a reaction. You turned restraint into a weapon. You cracked their system. You broke their code. You unplugged from their games and rewired your own path. And now, the same ones who mocked you, they're quiet, uncomfortable, impressed, threatened, and deep down, curious. Because no one saw it coming. Chosen one, this was never about letting it go. It was about elevating above it. It was never about being silent. It was about being so powerful you didn't have to raise your voice to dominate the entire room. You didn't just hold your peace, you weaponized it. And now the whole room knows exactly who the hell you are. Number 2, you turned self-respect into a silent kill shot. They wanted a fight. You gave them a funeral and didn't even show up to bury them. That's what dignity does in the hands of someone evolved. They launched an emotional war, desperate for screams, chaos, exposure, but instead you delivered a silence so sharp it sliced through their ego like a scalpel. No shouting, no threats, no messy retaliation. Just stillness. Cold, flawless stillness that made every one of their pathetic moves look like a cry for help. And the most brutal part, you didn't lift a finger. You let their own actions become the evidence. You let their desperation be the proof. While they spun stories, exaggerated emotions, and made a performance of conflict, you didn't even blink. Your restraint wasn't submission, it was domination. You made dignity look like a damn battlefield and walked off without a scar. See, they were hoping you'd react. They needed that. They were addicted to your energy, hoping to hijack your emotions and bend your voice into a reaction they could use. But you denied them everything. You stripped the situation of drama and turned it into a cold museum exhibit where their behavior now rots under the spotlight. And your silence. That's the sound of them realizing they lost before it even started. Most people think dignity is soft. They think it's walking away with tears in your eyes. But you didn't walk away. We need to make that clear. You rose above, and there's a massive difference. You didn't retreat. You ascended. You didn't run. You refused to descend into the filth they were rolling in. You knew something they didn't. Mud only stains those stupid enough to wrestle in it. While they made noise, you made statements. While they tried to play the victim, you became the verdict. Your calm wasn't just unsettling, it was surgical. It dissected their illusions in front of the very audience they tried to fool. They thought their lies would stick. They thought public opinion could bury you. But instead, the crowd turned. Because no matter how loud someone screams, if the other person stands still, people start asking questions. You didn't argue your truth. You embodied it. You didn't defend your name. You became the reason they had to explain theirs. That's not survival. That's a calculated counterstrike masked as silence. And now, Now they can't escape it. Every room they walk into, there's someone who saw how you handled it, someone who noticed how they tried to destroy your name and ended up strangling their own reputation with their bare hands. Because, the truth is, they embarrassed themselves trying to embarrass you. Let's talk about what really scared them. It wasn't that you didn't respond, it's that you didn't need to. You had every right to explode, to expose, to drag them into the dirt. But you didn't. Why? Because that would have required lowering your frequency. And chosen ones don't stoop. We elevate. You don't chase justice. You become the reason justice happens in silence. Think of Michelle Obama. When they go low, we go high. That wasn't a cute quote. That was a psychological weapon, and that's exactly what you wielded. You made composure look criminal. You didn't yell. You intimidated. You didn't post. You unplugged. And that power, that's what turned your dignity into warfare, because nothing's more terrifying to an unstable ego than someone who refuses to play their dirty little game. And here's the kill shot. Your grace looked like vengeance to them. That's why they panicked. That's why they spiraled. Because you didn't clap back. You watched them collapse under their own lies. Every passive-aggressive jab they launched at you returned to sender. Every time they expected you to break character, you deepened it. And while they performed chaos, you sat still, letting their shadows dance alone in the spotlight. That's the part that messes with them now. They don't know what to say. They don't know how to defend themselves against something that never attacked. They're scrambling to explain why they lost a war they swore they'd win. And you've already moved on, but the audience hasn't. The people watching are still thinking about how you carried yourself, still replaying the way you stayed composed in the face of emotional filth. They're still whispering about how you made self-respect look like a weapon. You didn't rise above in some self-righteous fantasy. You executed a silent takedown so refined that even the doubters had to admit, you're not just mature, you're dangerous when calm. You redefined dignity in real time. You showed that being still isn't being stuck, it's being strategic. You showed that silence doesn't mean powerless, it means lethal. You turned your back on the chaos, and it imploded without you. And now the same people who called you cold, fake, passive, they're imitating your silence, trying to copy the moves they once mocked. Because deep down, even they know dignity in the face of destruction is a superpower, and you just unlocked it. Here's a question you probably asked yourself during all this. Did I do the right thing by staying silent? Let me answer that for you. You didn't just do the right thing. You did the unthinkable thing. You walked away clean from a situation designed to ruin you. You kept your hands unstained while they clawed at their own reflection. You let the fire burn without throwing gasoline. That wasn't weakness, that was warfare, and they lost. Let them sit in it. Let them deal with the mess they made trying to sabotage you, because you're not just admired now, you're studied. You're the example of how not to fall for bait, how not to dance when provoked, how to turn every ounce of pressure into power. You proved that the strongest person in the room isn't the loudest. It's the one who could wreck everyone and chooses not to. You made dignity look like a warning shot, and whether they admit it or not, they heard it loud and clear. So don't you dare question your path. You didn't just survive that disgusting situation, you dominated it without raising your voice. You proved that poise is more powerful than panic, that composure is more cutting than rage, that self-respect, when weaponized, becomes the end of every petty war. You didn't react. You didn't beg. You didn't explain. You simply stood tall and let the filth collapse on its own. Number 3, you showed that clean hands can still draw blood. They dirtied their hands trying to bury you and still ended up 6 feet beneath your silence. That's what burns them the most. You didn't even fight back. You didn't throw dirt. You didn't twist the truth, fake the narrative, or play the victim card. You walked into a filthy war zone with nothing but clean hands and a clear conscience, and still walked out with the win. That's not just power. That's prophecy fulfilled by discipline. They thought being good meant being gullible. They thought your honesty was a weakness. They thought your refusal to lie, manipulate, or smear them would cost you everything. But they forgot. Truth doesn't panic. Truth doesn't chase. Truth doesn't break under pressure. It waits. And you waited like a storm that knows its time is coming. While they scrambled to build their fake empire of lies, you stood still, solid. And then the cracks started showing. Because the universe, it doesn't bless mess. It exposes it, one piece at a time. Their story unraveled and you didn't have to say a word. Time became your attorney. Silence became your sword. And truth became your revenge. You didn't even need to win the battle. You made the battle look pathetic. You rose so far above their behavior, their drama started looking like theater. You didn't react because you knew something deeper. When your conscience is clean, the universe fights for you. You weren't playing checkers with fools. You were mastering chess with the cosmos. They tried to smear your name. The universe turned the spotlight back on them. They tried to rush lies into the world. The truth showed up late, but undefeated. And yes, chosen one, you questioned it. You wondered if staying quiet was smart. You wondered if people would believe them. But look around now. Who's still standing? Who's gaining strength while they rot in the consequences of their deception? Your clean hands weren't weakness. They were weapons, because sometimes the sharpest blade is having nothing to hide. Number 4, you became the mirror that shattered the mask. You didn't destroy them, you just held up a mirror and let them self-destruct. That's the level of warfare they didn't see coming. No words, no drama, no warnings, just presence, just energy, just silence that stripped them bare. You didn't clap back, you stood still. And that stillness? It became a high-definition reflection of everything they were trying to hide. They expected rage. You gave them restraint. They expected chaos. You gave them calm. And that calm? It screamed louder than anything you could have said. That's what manipulators fear the most. Not exposure, not judgment, reflection. Because when you don't take the bait, they're forced to face their own noise. And trust me, chosen one, their lies echo louder when they're not competing with your reaction. You left them alone with their own energy, and it ate them alive. You didn't have to explain yourself. The truth around you vibrated too loud to ignore. You didn't need an audience. The universe gave you one. And when they tried to twist the narrative, people started noticing. Why is the one staying quiet the only one who seems unbothered? Why does the one being blamed look the most at peace? Because calm doesn't lie. Chaos does. You became a spiritual X-ray. Just by being in the room, you made people feel exposed. It wasn't judgment. It was resonance. You didn't throw their filth back at them. You let them smell it for the first time. That's why they twitched in your presence. That's why they turned the blame game up. Because looking at you was looking at everything they were running from. And no, you didn't humiliate them. They humiliated themselves. You didn't shame them. They tripped over their own guilt. You didn't fight darkness. You made it stare into its own reflection. And darkness can't handle that level of honesty. You stood there like a mirror, and that was enough. Because some enemies aren't defeated by force, they're undone by their own reflection. And you, chosen one, became the reflection they couldn't survive. Number 5. You let karma crash louder than any comeback. You didn't seek revenge, you became the reason they met it. That's what makes your power terrifying. You didn't throw punches, you just stepped back and let the universe unsheath its sword. No screaming, no plotting, no public spectacle. You simply watch time do what time always does. Separate the real from the rotten. They thought your silence meant defeat, but really it was the sound of the storm charging up behind them. You understood something they never could. Retaliation feeds the fire, but consequences extinguish it. You didn't need to lift a hand. You let gravity pull their actions back to them. Because what people forget is that energy is a boomerang, and you stayed still just long enough to watch it return. They threw lies into the air thinking they'd float forever, but lies are heavy. They always fall back down, and they always land where they were launched. You didn't chase justice, you embodied it. Your patience became the court, your peace became the verdict. You watched everything unfold like a movie you'd already seen, because chosen ones don't beg the universe for karma. The universe automatically defends what's aligned. You didn't need to yell, "You'll regret this." You simply let regret do the talking. And look at them now, exhausted, paranoid, tripping over their own false stories, wondering why everything they touch keeps crumbling. That's not bad luck, that's physics. They sent chaos your way, and it circled back with interest. They planted hate, and it bloomed in their own garden. You proved something sacred. Karma isn't mystical, it's mathematical. For every lie told, truth multiplies. For every trap set, fate divides. Retaliation might please the ego for a second, but consequences feed justice for a lifetime. And you waited. You let silence become your strategy, not your surrender. Because when you're aligned with the universe, you don't chase payback. You watch it arrive on schedule. You didn't win by striking back. You won by standing still long enough to hear their downfall echo. Number 6. You made their dirt look like confessions. They threw dirt at you, hoping to bury you, and ended up highlighting how clean you really were. That's the irony they choked on. Every move they made to stain you only backfired. Every lie, every whisper, every slanderous attempt to cloud your name ended up polishing your reputation. Because when you're built from integrity, mud doesn't stick. It slides off and leaves the attacker covered in their own filth. They launched character assassinations, hoping you'd panic. They tried to twist your truth, hoping you'd break. But you didn't shrink, you didn't fold, you didn't morph into their level just to survive the moment. You stood in it, unmoved, not because it didn't hurt, but because you refused to let it change who you are. You didn't fake strength, you revealed it. That's what they couldn't predict. They thought pain would transform you into something bitter, something reactive, something easy to mock. But pain didn't deform you, it refined you. Your glow didn't come from wanting attention, it came from surviving hell without adopting its habits. You stayed real in a world obsessed with pretending, and that's what made you dangerous. The more they threw at you, the more people started noticing, wait, why does this person still seem calm, still look focused, still radiate peace? Because when your soul is aligned, slander only reveals the contrast. It's not you that looks bad, it's them. You didn't need to make announcements. You didn't need to launch counterattacks. You let the dirt reveal who was throwing it. And now, everyone sees it. They tried to drown your image in lies, and now they're the ones gasping for air, because truth doesn't rush, but it always surfaces. You didn't win because you argued louder. You won because you were unshakably clean in a situation engineered to make you filthy. And that kind of restraint, that kind of resilience, is the ultimate exposure. You didn't just walk away unstained. You walked away shining, and they can't stop squinting. Number 7. You showed that real power doesn't flinch. They pressed every button, and you still didn't blink. That's not silence, that's dominance. Most people break the second pressure hits. They snap, explode, overshare, lash out, and in doing so, hand over the blueprint to their weakness. But not you. You didn't just stay calm. You weaponized restraint. You made patience look like a power move. While they danced like fools trying to provoke you, you stood still like a storm, waiting for the right second to strike, or not strike at all. Because that's the real secret. Whoever can trigger you controls you, and you didn't give them that power, not for 1 second. They thought control was noise. They thought power meant showing teeth. But you showed them something colder. Power is how little you need to prove. You didn't raise your voice. You raised the standard. You didn't bark. You calculated. And that shook them harder than any scream ever could. They couldn't understand how someone could take hit after hit and not flinch. But what they missed is this. You weren't suppressing emotions. You were directing them. Every ounce of that pain was being forged into precision, into awareness, into self-mastery. That's not weakness. That's mental warfare. Most people think yelling means strength, but yelling is just fear disguised as force. You didn't yell. You didn't beg. You didn't even explain. You just remained still. And in that stillness, you exposed every unstable fool who thought they had control over you. You didn't hold back because you were scared. You held back because you had nothing to lose and everything to gain. You didn't just avoid chaos, you outlasted it. And now everyone sees it. You didn't lose yourself. You found yourself in silence, in pressure, in the middle of a situation designed to drag you down. You didn't fold. You didn't react. You didn't flinch. That's what power really looks like, and they'll never forget it. Number 8. You used humiliation as the blueprint for evolution. They tried to break you with shame and ended up handing you the tools to rebuild something stronger. See, that's where they miscalculated. They thought humiliation would hollow you out, that public embarrassment, betrayal, or mockery would make you fold, curse, disappear. But you didn't fold, you expanded. You didn't collapse under their attempts to reduce you. You transformed in full view of the same audience they were trying to turn against you. You didn't use your pain to strike back. You used it to see deeper. You didn't become bitter. You became brilliantly aware. You saw through their faces, their fake kindness, their performances. You realized that people only try to humiliate what they secretly fear, and what they fear most is someone who can't be destroyed. That moment of humiliation stripped the last illusion off the world, and what was left? Clarity. You saw that cruelty isn't strength, it's a mask over emptiness. That people who laugh the loudest often suffer in silence, that those who try to shame you are almost always running from their own reflection. And instead of becoming like them, you chose to evolve past them. You became water, calm, flexible, but capable of cutting through stone. You flowed through pain without becoming it. You adapted without surrendering your essence. You took every insult, every whisper, every betrayal, and turned it into a mirror. Not to punish others, but to understand yourself on a level most people will never touch. You didn't lose your heart. You just stopped offering it to people who wanted to feed off it. You didn't reject the pain. You recycled it. Humiliation didn't destroy you. It humanized you, then refined you into something wiser, sharper, calmer, and far more dangerous. Because now they see it. What was supposed to leave you ruined made you unshakably real. They tried to reduce you to shame. Instead, you became someone shame can no longer reach. Number 9. You were too royal to feed on revenge. You could have burned them, but you chose to rise so high, the flames couldn't reach you. That's what they'll never understand. They were bracing for war, expecting blood. They thought if they hit you hard enough, you'd snap, that you'd stoop, that you'd strike back, but you didn't. Not because you were scared, but because you were already above them. And royalty doesn't wrestle in dirt. You had every reason to expose them, every right to swing back, but you didn't trade your crown for chaos. You didn't let their pettiness hijack your evolution. Why? Because you understood what they didn't. Revenge is for people who still need proof. And you are the proof. You knew that when you're chosen, the universe takes your silence personally. It steps in, it handles it, and it never misses. They confused your restraint for weakness, but what they saw as fear was discipline. What they called passivity was vision. You were never thinking about revenge. You were focused on becoming so aligned, so elevated, that even karma had to wait for your signal. And now they're choking on the aftermath, not because you destroyed them, but because they destroyed themselves. You didn't have to lift a finger. Their guilt is the punishment. Their own actions were the weapon. And the silence you gave them. That was the loudest sentencing they'll ever receive. You chose peace, not because it was easy, but because it was powerful. You didn't avoid the fight. You ended it by outgrowing it. Because the truth is, revenge might feel good for a moment, but evolution lasts forever. So no, you didn't win by screaming. You won by glowing. You didn't take revenge. You became too powerful for it to matter. And the people watching, they saw it all. They saw that real punishment isn't rage. It's the quiet grace of someone who refuses to descend. You didn't just take the high road, you owned it. And now your name walks through rooms your enemies will never be invited into. Number 10. You made forgiveness feel like a sentence. You forgave them, and somehow that's what hurt them the most. They expected rage. They were ready for war. They were bracing themselves for the version of you that would scream, expose, explode. But instead, you gave them something far more lethal: grace. And that's what unhinged them, because when someone guilty is met with forgiveness instead of fire, they're forced to sit alone in a courtroom of their own conscience. You didn't free them. You freed yourself. And that's what haunts them now. Not the silence, but the fact that you found peace while they're still chained to the mess they created. Forgiveness in the hands of the evolved becomes a weapon, not one that wounds, but one that reflects. When you didn't retaliate, when you didn't clap back, when you just let it go, you became a mirror. And no manipulator survives long in front of a clear reflection. Your grace wasn't kindness. It was exposure. They needed your anger to feel justified. They needed your outrage to balance their guilt. But your calm, your peace, your total disinterest in continuing the war, that was the real punishment. You didn't choose reconciliation. You chose liberation. You left the mess, the lies, the noise, and carried only your dignity with you. And now they can't sleep, because your grace didn't say, "It's okay." It said, "I see what you did, and I'm walking away from it untouched." You didn't burn bridges. You didn't leave a trail of rage. You just left, clean, quiet, untouchable. And the silence you left behind is louder than any revenge could have been. They can't call you bitter. They can't call you dramatic. They can't paint you as the villain. So now they sit in what's left, their own guilt, amplified by your grace. You showed the world something rare, that forgiveness, when done right, isn't weakness. It's psychological warfare wearing a halo. You didn't need closure. You became it. And now your peace walks with you, while their conscience follows them like a shadow that won't shut up. Number 11. You took their scandal and made it a stage. They thought they were watching your downfall. Turns out they were attending your initiation. That's how backwards they had it. They thought you were crumbling, that the whispers would collapse you, that the noise would consume you. But while they pointed, laughed, and played audience to your humiliation, you were too busy evolving. You weren't just surviving the mess. You were building a blueprint inside of it. You didn't panic. You didn't plead. You orchestrated stillness like a symphony. You took a moment designed to ruin you and turned it into a lesson no one will forget. Your silence wasn't passive. It had architecture. It had levels. Every breath, every pause, every non-response was calculated, and what looked like taking the high road was really you constructing a stairway out of their chaos. You didn't match their energy. You altered the entire frequency. While they were playing games, you were writing chapters. You turned their fire into fuel, their gossip into gospel, their drama into direction. People were watching, and they were learning how real strength doesn't scream. It holds frame, learning that true power doesn't beg to be seen. It reveals itself in how unbothered you remained when everything was built to break you. And yes, they talked. Yes, they laughed. But they're not laughing now. Because what was supposed to shame you ended up becoming the greatest sermon you never preached. You didn't defend your name. You demonstrated it. You didn't need applause. You earned respect. Quietly, brutally, elegantly. You showed them that maturity is louder than scandal. That class is stronger than chaos. That when the world tries to dirty your name, you can let them and still walk out cleaner than all of them. You didn't run from the mess. You stood still and let the truth settle. You didn't fight for your image. You let the universe refine it. And now the same people who watched for your collapse, they're taking notes on how you never even trembled. You didn't just survive the public mess. You turned it into a masterclass. Number 12. You stayed soft in a world that weaponized your kindness. They tried to break your spirit, and all they did was reveal how untouchable it actually is. They threw betrayal like daggers. They mocked you, humiliated you, tried to twist your soul into something bitter. Their goal wasn't just to hurt you, it was to change you. They wanted to see the light in your eyes fade, the warmth in your voice turn cold, the softness in you collapse into stone. But you didn't give them that satisfaction. You stayed human in a situation designed to strip you of it. You didn't just walk through hell. You walked through it without letting the fire burn away your heart. And that, chosen one, is a form of power they'll never understand. Anyone can become cruel after being mistreated. But to stay kind, calm, and grounded while you're bleeding, that's legendary. That's rebellion. Because you didn't become what hurt you. You didn't mimic the manipulators. You didn't adopt their games or their poison. You stayed you, whole, with your empathy intact. That's what enraged them the most. That no matter what they did, you didn't lose your soul. You didn't descend into the mud. You let them flail in it alone. They wanted you hollow. They wanted you numb. Instead, you showed them something colder than vengeance, compassion they didn't deserve, not to excuse what they did, but to prove they never had the power to deform your essence. Your humanity became the final humiliation, because you didn't survive them with fists. You outclassed them with character. You didn't scream. You didn't beg. You didn't turn into them. You walked away with your peace in one hand and your dignity in the other. And now they have to sit with that, because they became monsters trying to fight one dash, only to find out you never stooped low enough to be one. You weren't weak for staying soft. You were invincible for refusing to harden. That's not survival, that's transcendence, and they'll be haunted forever by the fact that after everything they did, you stayed human. You redefined victory without saying a word. You didn't just win. You left the battlefield so far behind, they're still throwing punches at your shadow. This wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about applause. It wasn't even about proving them wrong. You reached a level where winning stopped looking like domination and started looking like peace. While they chased clout and chaos, you chased clarity. And when you caught it, everything else stopped mattering. You didn't scream, "I won." You didn't beg for credit. You just walked away whole and let your wholeness be the proof. They thought walking away meant you lost, but you didn't walk away in defeat. You walked away in elevation. You didn't win over them, you won beyond them. Your peace became your crown. Your silence became your signature. You didn't need to outshine them. You simply stopped standing near their darkness. And now, your absence is louder than their presence. That's what unsettled them. Not just what you went through, but how you carried it. You faced betrayal without bitterness, humiliation without hatred, madness without a meltdown. You didn't collapse, you climbed. You didn't scream, you ascended. People expected to see you broken. Instead, they saw you reborn. You became living proof that peace is a flex, that evolution isn't loud, but it's undeniable. And while they're still trying to prove a point, you are the point. You didn't lose anything. You revealed everything. So stand tall, chosen one. You didn't just survive, you redefined what surviving looks like. You turned betrayal into boundaries, chaos into code, pain into personal power. And if this message hits your soul, it's because your soul already knows. You're not who they tried to break. You're who the storm built in secret. Victory didn't roar this time. It whispered, and only the ones aligned with truth recognized the sound. This wasn't a loss, it was a graduation. And while they gossip about your silence, the universe is promoting your peace. So in the end, you didn't just survive a disgusting situation. You rewrote the rules of how power, grace, and silence operate under pressure. You turned every attack into evidence, every humiliation into height, and every attempt to destroy you into a case study in resilience. That's what chosen ones do. We don't just win, we redefine winning. If this message hit your core, drop 777 in the comments, hit like, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs to remember who they are. Thank you, chosen one. Stay dangerous, stay elevated.